Okay, Kristin, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for taking the time to come on today.
And thank you so much for having me.
Of course, yes. I appreciate social media and the internet during situations like this where I just put out feelers looking for people to come on and talk about health, wellness, women's health, in this particular case, postpartum recovery and things like that. And that's how I found you. So
Yes,
I love when the worlds collide.
yes, it's awesome.
Yes, indeed. So you are an OG in the Pilates space, I would say. You have been doing Pilates-esque activities and exercises for over 30 years. Can you talk a little bit about how you got started in that space?
Definitely. I was at NYU for theater, and in my acting classes, someone came in and started teaching us yoga, and I absolutely fell in love with it. And I was like, whoa, this is awesome. And looking back at it, I also had a movement teacher, Joanne, who was doing a lot of different somatic type exercises with us, but she would do Pilates with us sometimes, Feldenkrais, Alexander technique. When I graduated, I certified to teach yoga first, and I was teaching yoga at all the different gyms and studios and clubs in New York City. And I was asked to teach Pilates classes or sub Pilates classes. I think a lot of in the 90s, everyone was like, oh, it's just all the same thing. And I was like, oh, okay, I need to discover this Pilates stuff as well, or really, dig into it deeper. And so I went to Kane School of Core Integration and did my Pilates certification, and absolutely have always loved the combination of the yoga and the Pilates and strength training and what have you. But Pilates being such an incredible foundation for core strength, definitely for postpartum. It's such a great way for moms to come back into that deeper connection with the transverse abdominals.
I can imagine that also the Pilates world has changed a lot over the past 30
Oh, yes.
years. Yes, talk a little bit about that.
I would say, especially in the earlier days, like I mentioned, there was even kind of confusion between like the difference in modalities and looping it all into one. Like, oh, can you sub my Pilates class because you're on the roster at Crunch Gym, as a yoga teacher? And I was like, well, wait a second, those are two different things. But I think in even looking back at like the old school studios and the spaces, it was a lot smaller. So even when I went to go get my certification, there was a landscape, and there was the Romanas, and there was the classical, and there was like places I could go, but not like there is today. Nowadays, I feel like it's just exploded, and there's so many different hybrids. Back then we had classical and there was a little bit of contemporary, but there wasn't like hot Pilates and Pilates with weights and Pilates with this. And, there's like so much now that's taken off hybrid. And so it was a little bit easier to navigate because I felt like there wasn't so much noise. And I loved Kelly because Kelly has a background in physical therapy, and her Pilates was very PT based and helping people. She wasn't rigid, although she had done some classical Pilates. She wasn't rigid with that method. And so I kind of liked that more broader approach, being able to know both and to do both. And I also liked how she was really integrating it into helping people rehab in certain ways, or to just be more functional in the activities they were doing.
Yes, that's one thing that I've learned recently as a physical therapist. I don't think I was quite exposed and aware enough of the fact that Pilates does have a nice crossover with physical therapy. There are people, I have friends in Atlanta that do Pilates physical therapy. That's their entire business model is, yep, getting people on the reformer, doing mat Pilates, and that's how they structure their rehab programs. So yes, to your point, I think it's really taken on a lot of different faces, and there's a lot of different just areas of Pilates now that you wouldn't have necessarily expected in the 90s. So I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it is cool. And I honestly don't mind the innovation. I think that it's really awesome to, obviously you don't want to just like take a class from someone who's only done a weekend workshop and all of a sudden calls themselves a Pilates instructor on Instagram. But I do think that Joseph Pilates was an innovator and an inventor. And if you look at, the things that people have been able to kind of branch out with from his original method, I think it's really cool. I think it's nice to know that even with what we were going to talk about today as well with tonal Pilates, that you can innovate and you can continue to create and still remain true to the principles of the work.
Yes. Yep. And you brought up tonal. I want you to explain what tonal is for people that don't quite know, because I honestly wasn't too familiar with it. So I had to do a little bit of digging. So for our listeners, do explain what tonal is and then what you are going to be doing with them.
Okay, so tonal is this really cool piece of equipment that you can put on your wall. I almost think of it more like an in-home cable system. So when you go to the gym and you see that cable system, and again, that's why it's really nice as well, even for PT and rehab, but it's mainly for strength training. And so it has two arms that are adjustable that you can slide up, you can slide down, you can rotate out, you can rotate in, and the levers can click up certain amounts. And then you've got the cables on them. So you've got this really cool smart AI resistance that you can use with handles. It also comes with a bar and also with a rope cable, like for triceps and things like that. So it is your in-home personal trainer, and on it you've got all these different programs from different world-class personal trainers, and you can lift up to about 250, or actually you can lift up to 250 pounds. The original tonal one I think was 200. Tonal 2 is 250. Wow. And what's cool about it is it can rise up in increments of 1 pound at a time. So if you're at home and you have a 5-pound set of dumbbells and an 8-pound set of dumbbells, those are your two options. Where with tonal, you can go from 5 pounds to 6 pounds to 7 pounds, but it's working with you. So it's tracking your data, and every day that you're on it, it will start to push you a little bit further, which is really nice for someone who doesn't have access to a personal trainer who can load plates for them and get them to start lifting heavier and have that progressive overload. Tonal will do it for you. It's very sleek. It's very, I think, tech forward and very innovative, which is really cool. And then with Pilates, because it has the two arms and because you can use a T-lock to switch out the different handles or the bar, now you've got Pilates loops. So we can just attach the Pilates loops to the end of Tonal's arms and then use the loops the same way you might use a reformer, a tower, the Pilates equipment. So it's really cool. The only difference is you're mainly lying on the mat, on the floor, taking the resistance, doing the hundreds with the resistance, laying on your back, doing the leg circles. There's also a bench that comes with Tonal. So for some of, like, if you've ever done T-straps or pulling straps when you're on the belly on the long box on a reformer, it's a similar sensation, but instead you just lay on the bench. And so there's so many cool variations, and I feel like we're just tipping the surface, or like just scratching the surface. And so we're going to start to continue to create a lot more programs and classes and integrate more Pilates moves.
So when did you get started with tonal?
That was at the end of the summer. So I was with Peloton for 6 years. I launched their yoga program in 2018. And once I was there, I kept begging them to start adding Pilates as well to the platform, and eventually they did. And in 2024 is when I ended up, after having an amazing 6 years with Peloton, I was like, I'm going to move out on my own now, and had a year-long non-compete. So I was just kind of, waiting it out and feeling my way and trying to think of like what would be a fun next step. And I always knew I wanted to create my own movement platform for people who wanted my yoga classes, that they weren't getting new content at Peloton. But then Tonal approached me and I said, this sounds so cool. I love it, because it's a great way for especially the people already on Tonal to experience Pilates, which is so integrative to strength training. It's so good in keeping your posture and your form and that precision and that control. And it's a different kind of strength. It's not the like max out at your heaviest. It's more like be really mindful and in control of your movement. And then I think it's also nice for, say, women who are not as into strength training or nervous about strength training. They get on Tonal and start doing Pilates, and then they're like, oh, there's this whole other world that I can also combine my training with. So
yeah, it's like a nice little segue into strength training too.
Exactly, because it's definitely important for women. And my age, I'm 52, it's very important to maintain that muscle mass, the bone density, all of those things that can start to, you can start to lose as you age.
Well, I'm glad you brought this up, because I think a lot of what I see on the internet revolving around Pilates, and I do think that I am predisposed to more of a strength training biased feed, but it's women kind of dogging Pilates, or not necessarily dogging it, but saying like, you can't just do Pilates. You're not going to get the Pilates body by only doing Pilates. There's these women that are touting that they do Pilates 7 days a week and they look like this.
Yeah.
Probably not true, because you have to have a well-rounded approach. Like, you have to consider their nutrition. Are they strength training? Are they implementing some high intensity cardio? So can you talk a little bit on that, touch on that? What does your program look like? What does your routine look like? And when is Pilates appropriate versus strength training, especially as we age, when we're trying to maintain or sustain bone mass and things like that?
That's a great question. And ever since I started way back when, even in the 90s, I got my very first Crunch gym membership. And so even though I was teaching yoga and then teaching Pilates, I had a personal trainer that I would strength train with. And then I got my ACE certification. And then years later, my NASM certification. And when I created my movement platform, I call it, the three pillars I have is flow, sculpt, and connect, because I think there is a place for the flow, for the mobility and the flexibility, the range of movement for sure. For the sculpt, for the having to work against resistance in some way. And as yogis, we do a lot of press, we don't do a lot of pull. So it's important for us to also get that pulling movement, work against resistance. And then the connection. And the connection is that mind-body connection that I think you get through a movement practice like Pilates, as well as meditation, right? So, but I think that strength for sure is important, and there needs to be strength training. And with the Pilates body, there's a lot of different factors, like you mentioned, and there's also genetics. So, a lot of times it's like you can look at a 20-year-old going like, I've got this Pilates body, but look at a 50-something-year-old and you're like, well, I don't know if that's enough to just cut it. We can't just
Right.
Pilates. But it also depends on what are you looking for, right? And I always want to bring it back to the intrinsic results, less the extrinsic, because at the end of the day, you want to be able to lift something heavy if need be, or open a jar even. Like, people start to lose grip strength as they age. And it's really important to be able to have the capacity to hold something heavy, to have good grip strength. You're not going to get that unless you're picking something heavy up, right? Like your weights, or hanging on a bar and trying to do pull-ups. Because those body weight strength exercises are great as well. And you can get some of that in yoga, but nothing like actual strength training and actually taxing your muscles to a specific way of progressive overload, right? Whether you're lifting heavier or adding more reps or whatever it is that you're doing. Now, cardiovascular, that's not like my huge pillar on my app, because I'm not leading runs or things like that. I do still think cardiovascular endurance and that kind of stuff is important too. Just reminding people to get out and walk and get their heart rate up and use an assault bike or whatever it is that you really love, to hike, right? Those kind of things. But I think that I've never been one of these. It's just like, I think, a well-rounded plate of nutrition. I'm never going to be like a keto person. Like, you need your protein, you need your carbs, you need your fat, you even need your sweet treat every now and then. You need your
I love my sweet treat.
right? Yeah, and you need that recovery day. You can't just push yourself hard all the time. So when you look at the same thing with the fitness world, like, for someone to just only be, no, just this, just protein, just Pilates, it's kind of like, well, no, it has a place on your plate, but it shouldn't take up your whole plate. And so I do think that that's the hardest part with social media sometimes, is it's clickbait. People need to get your attention quickly. They'll show you this thing, but there's probably there's a lot more to it.
Yes, there's a lot more to unpack. What would you say to women then who are wanting to get into Pilates to build muscle mass?
Well, if you're going to build muscle mass with Pilates, you're going to have some sort of resistance or time under tension, right? So if you're doing plank in Pilates and holding that and really engaging all of your muscles, if you're doing your Pilates push-ups, which is a great exercise, I think. I do love the one thing I do like seeing lately that a lot of people are doing in this present day and age of Pilates is they're integrating weights. So it's like they're talking about Pilates versus strength training, but a lot of them, I see them actually holding 10-pound dumbbells and doing, side plank and all sorts of stuff with the weights. So I'm like, you're actually just kind of combining strength training with Pilates.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's pretty much the underlying theme, is if it's muscle mass you're trying to gain, there needs to be some sort of progressive overload. If it's connection to the core and, like you were saying earlier, the intrinsic benefit of the exercise, it's going to be more so of that traditional Pilates core connection, transverse abdominis awareness. And there's a place for both. I never tried Pilates until I was pregnant, and I know, it's actually kind of an interesting story. I was having this debilitating back pain, and I stayed active through all 9 months of pregnancy, very much working out like 5, 6 days a week because it just felt good, but right around the start of my second trimester, just very uncomfortable low back pain, and my sister-in-law was in town. She was like, "Look," she's had 2 kids. She said, Pilates helped me a lot. Postpartum, I wish I had done it in pregnancy too. Why don't we go try a class? I took one class and I'm sure there were other factors involved, but I woke up the next day, no back pain.
Amazing.
Yeah, I was like, wow, I'm sold. So I started doing Pilates throughout my second trimester. And then around the third, it started actually to become very painful, which makes sense because of the way that relaxin starts to increase as the body is prepping for birth. There's a lot less stability at those joints that are otherwise, you know, immovable joints, those fibrous joints like the SI joint, the pubic symphysis. I was doing, and I'll ask you about this in a second. I don't think it was true Pilates, it was Legree.
Yeah, Legree is pretty intense.
It's
That
pretty
makes
intense.
make a
Yeah,
partner.
yeah,
Yes.
lots of single leg, stability stuff on the reformer, the leg is moving back behind you, you're sliding, lots of isolated adductor work, and it helped a lot, and then it started to hurt a lot, and so I stopped, but I'm now really excited and anxious to get back to it because I think a lot of those symptoms would be gone. All of that to say, a very long-winded explanation to kind of open up the floor to talk about when is it appropriate in pregnancy versus postpartum, and when would you recommend? And I know everybody is different, but when we should start.
I think for sure there's so much beneficial aspects to Pilates, especially for women in pregnancy and postpartum, because of the emphasis on strengthening the transverse abdominals and the pelvic floor muscles, and in a way that's very smart. It's unlike Kegels, where you're just a lot of times women start doing Kegels and they just hold and grip and they're not actually relaxing the muscles as well, like the whole pelvic, just allowing it to relax and then to also engage. So I think Pilates is very smart in the way that it can help you connect to pelvic floor muscles, how that also connects to your TVA, to your transverse abdominals, to help you with breath work. I think that lateral breathing is so important. And I think women during pregnancy, myself included, can start to reverse breathe. So learning how to manage breath and learning how to manage pressure, because we have this pressure container inside of us. And so if we're not breathing and linking the diaphragm with the pelvic floor and the transverse abdominals, like everything just starts to kind of snowball in the wrong direction. And so I think all of that's important to learn while you're pregnant, before you get pregnant, during pregnancy, after pregnancy. And I think those are the key foundations to be focused on, less the big kind of broader movements, like you were saying, the crazy lunges or the adductors. Emphasis on the resistance and that strength when you're on a carriage or when you're on a reformer. If you have a good teacher who's mindful and can lead you through exercises in a way that's safe during pregnancy and postpartum, that would be the way I would go. Not some of these general classes where they're having you just, do these different exercises that might not be correct, or right, not correct, but not right for someone in pregnancy in that stage. So I like even mat focused, that much safer.
Yeah.
You also have to be careful with coning and doming and looking out for that kind of little shark fin that can lead to diastasis if you're putting that intra-abdominal pressure, right? Sometimes we do that not realizing that we're pushing out against the core as opposed to pulling in and lengthening up, or pushing out against the front surface of our body, right?
Right. Yes, I think in retrospect, the type of Pilates I was doing, which someone had messaged me on Instagram and said, "Hey, that's actually Legree," which, me being pretty uneducated about Pilates, I was like, "Okay, whatever it is, it's not feeling great." But I think if I had done something a little more foundational, like just mat Pilates, kind of to your point, what you're talking about, focusing on the breath work, connecting to the pelvic floor muscles, and maybe sort of tapered off into something more like that as I started to gain in circumference, it probably would have been less painful. Uh, do you also practice Legree? And what is the difference there?
I have not done much Legree. I've done
Okay.
some SLT classes in New York City, which has a similar type reformer where they have I feel like it's more like fitness based Pilates, or
Yes, that's what it felt like.
sense it feels more like a fitness slash aerobic slash, like cardio Pilates. It's less of like coming in and laying on a reformer and really tapping into that mind body connection and moving with that precision and the control. It goes much faster. I felt like I didn't have enough time to really stay connected in some moves. I felt like it was a good workout. It was hard, and the next day I was sore.
Hmm.
It definitely feels super different than traditional Pilates or Pilates that you would just go into. And like even the studios that have maybe reformer classes where you have 5 or 6 people on a reformer, they're much more mindful, and the attention is on each student and the form, where Legree just feels more like you're just in this class being led with an instructor on a microphone, kind of feeling the burn. And so I don't mind it, because people, especially if you're, in really good shape and you're in control of your core and you can do those exercises, great. But I also do see a lot of improper form or misalignment, or I also get nervous that people are going to injure themselves, because you are on this moving unstable platform a lot doing exercises, and it's pretty intense.
Yes.
I definitely like the other style better, and I can't speak to it too much because I've not taken a ton of Legree classes. Again, it's cool, it's innovative, it's different. It just definitely feels like someone who's very athletic to begin with.
Yes, and that is kind of the vibe that I got in there. Now I'm feeling a little more inspired to, when I get back into it, maybe try a different style of
Yes.
Pilates, because I mean, I love a challenge. And so I did feel like I was getting my ass kicked, but it was just a little too much too soon, probably for 6 month pregnant Ronnie.
Yeah, maybe so.
But yeah,
That's
yeah.
pregnant. That's cute. Yeah. And so
Yeah.
when my first son, Timothy, he was vaginal, unmedicated. I got to the hospital, just went into labor so quickly. By the time I was there, it was like, okay, we just got to go. And then with my twins, it was a completely different pregnancy. It was C-section, but I made it to 39 and a half weeks, which is very rare
Wow.
for twins. So each kid
Very.
almost 7 pounds. So heavy kids inside my belly, but I did get diastasis or diastasis. I think it's pronounced both ways, but that is that split of the linea alba, the connective tissue that joins the rectus. And so for me, it was a very like deep dive into relearning all of the stuff I had learned in the early days in Pilates, reintegrating those things, reconnecting with my core, and learning how to function again. And it was like I felt like the Bermuda Triangle for a while. I was like, this is so weird and so different. And thank goodness I had a foundation to begin with. But there's so much subtleties to it. So it's so nice when someone can find someone like you, a PT, a private Pilates instructor, or a class that's really informative. I have a 21-day diastasis program on my app, that very small little things that you can do every day as you get back into exercise. So I think it's important just for women to remember, and also that even at this stage and age, like I'm always learning, I'm always discovering something new about my posture, or something that could be leading to, a little bit more of that pelvic floor dysfunction sometimes, or, all that stuff.
Right. Yeah, I think with diastasis or diastasis, whichever you prefer, a lot of women think that it's a dysfunction of pregnancy, and they think like, oh no, I have it. It's a diagnosis. It's a bad thing. But like the linea alba has to separate in order for your abdomen to expand and make room for the baby, or in your case, babies. And especially with twins, I mean, it's going to be even more likely that you're going to have that separation. I'm curious, how was your personal recovery with that?
It was long and taxing and frustrating, but also super rewarding, because I've never gone in for surgery or anything like that. When they'll measure the depth and the width, and so mine was like 2 fingers wide, but it was deep. It was like a deep diastasis, right above my belly button. And that's the other thing that's fascinating for women to explore. Like it can really be along that entire line. So some people find it's below their belly, right around their belly button, above their belly button. Like you could have a higher diastasis, or a middle, a lower. And so you'll discover a lot about your body. And then to your point, everyone's going to have that separation, that stretch, right? But for some people, it just comes back more naturally, depending on your age, if you've had multiples, how many pregnancies you've had, right? And to your point with twins, it's a lot more common. So I just worked a lot in the beginning, slow and mindfully with breath work. I had a friend who's an amazing Pilates teacher who would come over, and she and I together would go through different exercises, and I think it's so personal. Like I said, even the size of your diastasis, the depth of your diastasis, the place of your diastasis. So there'd be different exercises that you'd want to concentrate on for yourself. But then it's also layered. So once you get more connected and stronger in your core lying down, then you try and do it sitting up, and then you'll do it walking, and then you'll do it once you start doing exercises again.
Right.
Slow lunges, slow whatever it is, squats. Because a lot of times you don't even realize when you're putting pressure where that pressure is coming from when you're doing certain exercises. So all of a sudden you get used to being able to control it when you're lying on your back, but then when you're prone and you've got that gravity working against you, it's just a whole different thing.
Yes, I was just telling this story on another episode. It was so humbling for me, someone who worked out their whole pregnancy, has always loved to be active and stay fit. And I didn't carry super big. Like I mean, even at 8 months pregnant, people were like, that's crazy. It doesn't look that way. And I think part of it was because she was just my first pregnancy. But the aftermath, me just sitting at home on my couch trying to do a transverse abdominis contraction, trying to coordinate it with some diaphragmatic breathing, maybe a pelvic floor contraction, I was sore. Like I was actually my abdomen was so sore from that. Like I would do maybe 2 minutes of it a couple times a day and it was so fatigued. So it really does go to show that the body goes through some amazing transformations, and it takes a hot second to get back to what you were doing before.
Definitely. And to give yourself time and grace and patience, and it's, I get, like I was saying earlier, it's kind of a process, and I feel like it's a lifelong thing that you're continuing to learn about. And then I also like to remind women that it doesn't matter how far postpartum you are, it's never too late to actually you really work on that area, right? Because there'll be people who'll be like, oh, I never even realized I had it. And I'm like 8 years postpartum now. And I'm like, yeah, but there's still a lot of things we can do.
I'm so glad you said that, because with me having taken a step back from my physical therapy clinic and just focusing on the podcast and content creation in these postpartum weeks, I have hired a physical therapist who, she's an absolute rock star, but she has a little more pelvic floor experience, and she does that. She's in that rehab space with pelvic floor. And we were having this conversation the other day about how cool it is to be able to talk to somebody who's maybe in their like 60s, 70s, who had multiple kids and just blatantly accepted the aftermath symptoms. Like, oh, I always just leak. Oh, I've always had poor core stability. My back has always hurt. And that's just part of being a woman, or that's just part of menopause, whatever their excuse is. And then to be able to have them come into the clinic and teach them, actually, it's not too late. I know you had kids 20, 30 years ago, but we can still do things to help, whether it's the diastasis, whether it's, incontinence, leakage, pelvic pain, whatever it may be. I think women are we kind of just like power through things, especially when we're busy with kids and we don't necessarily think about how the pregnancy impacted us, or consider the fact that maybe it doesn't have to be this way. Maybe we can recover. So the education piece of it is really fun, I think, just to be able to show people what they can do later on down the road.
Agree. And it's also interesting that women, when they start to go through perimenopause and menopause, whether they had kids or not, similar things can happen, because
Really?
estrogen can lead
Mm.
to laxicity, like to all of those different, hormonal changes. I feel like some women start to experience similar things again later in life at this stage. Like the estrogen is important for keeping things right. So if you don't have enough estrogen and you feel like you're peeing in your pants again, or there's just so many things that can be that are, and also how your uterus goes through different changes, right? Post pregnancy and in menopause. So
Mhm.
I think it's good for women to realize, like, you're right. You might even develop things later at that stage of life as well. And it's so fascinating that you can go in and you can work on these things, and you don't just have to live with pain in your lower back or leaking, or, it's like there's so
Right.
much to do.
Right. All of these things we just like face with a brave face, and we
Yeah.
just like, oh no, it's just part of it. Like, no, not necessarily. It doesn't have to be. What was it like having twins? I am so curious about this. Twins don't run in my family, but I told my husband when I found out I was pregnant, I was like, I hope it's twins. And I don't know why. I just think it would be so fun to have twins. I'm just curious.
Oh, it's so amazing. During my pregnancy, super different. And again, like I was similar to you with the first. I was doing headstands at like 9.5, months pregnant, and everyone was similar. Like they were like, couldn't, I was not like huge. I had like a bump, but everyone was like, oh man, I was so active throughout the whole
Right.
pregnancy with my first. And I didn't think much about anything after having Timothy. Like I just kind of went back to doing all the things I had done. And then when I got pregnant with twins, it was like I worked out, but I had to be so much more mindful and I couldn't do as much as I had wanted to. And I got hit hard that first trimester with Timothy. I didn't get too much morning sickness. With the twins, I was like, ooh, I'm knocked out. And at that last stage and phase, I just felt like so much bigger than I ever had. Walking upstairs was intense. I wanted to deliver vaginally, but at the time, since I was carrying for so long, both of them were kind of fighting for the canal. So my doctor would see a head on the ultrasound, but he would feel a foot in the pelvic exam. So he's like, baby A was Robert head down, baby B was William breech. And so he was going to deliver the head down first, and then hopefully William would turn and he could deliver him as well head first. But then his foot was kind of getting in the way. And so he's like, I'm just too nervous to do this. And so then when they did the C-section, it flipped where my baby A became my baby B. So he did deliver William first and then Robert. So all along, like Robert was A, but he came out second, so he became B. C-section is a different experience as well. I'm kind of glad that I can relate to women now who've had both, because I kind of think it feels like when you're at the dentist, when you're numb and they're pulling on your teeth and you can feel the pull, but you can't feel the pain. That's
I've heard that.
with the C-section. Like you could feel kind of the action, but you can't really feel any pain. And totally different recovery, because now you've had surgery and now you're stitched, and now like you don't have maybe the vaginal stuff as much, but there's just so many different variables. But also seeing them grow together, seeing them be together, seeing their like friendship, and it's amazing. And it never gets easier, it just gets different, right? Like that's what a twin mom told me once, and I think that's true with all moms, right? Every stage of the game, you're like, oh, this is so hard, and then it's like, it's hard again, but just in a different way. And hard, challenging, I should say, but also so rewarding.
Right. Different phases, they lend themselves the opportunity for there to be different types of challenges. I was telling a friend recently, like the newborn phase is not as difficult as I was expecting. And so in my mind, I'm like, being a parent is so easy, but I know that this is a very short-lived time, and then she's going to be going through a sleep regression, or she's going to be like teething, and then there will be other challenges that we face. So yes, to your point, I mean, literally I'm 8 weeks in, so I can't say much, but I do think that every phase is just going to be more change, which is more fun, but also more difficult in a different way. Uh,
Yes, exactly.
it's exciting. We know a couple that just had triplets, and I was curious about logistics. How does that work? If you got twins and do they feed at the same time? Do they share a room? Do they take the same naps?
Well, I was like kind of nurture, baby led type of mom in the beginning.
Mhm.
Even with the second go round, though, I was like, okay, I think I'm going to have to do a little bit more of kind of a schedule and actual, think about what I'm doing now, and not just like, because again, with my first, like he nursed till he was almost 2.5, and we were just like, I was just so like intuitive to what he was doing, and I have a very hard time like being super disciplined with the kids, right? So with Robert and William, they were pretty good about getting on a similar, I feel like, nap schedule. My one son was never a great sleeper. I had that great, like, I can't remember what it's called, like boppy or something like that. And so I would do the double, like kind of the football hold, or they would nurse at the same time. But because every baby is so different and unique, one nursed really well, one didn't. And so by the 3-month mark, I think one had stopped, and by the 6-month mark, I was still nursing the other. But then I started to feel like, okay, let's just bottle feed them both. And so again, you kind of have to give yourself grace as a mom too. I was like, oh man, I went so long with my first, but then I was like, they're twins. It's different. Let's make it life easier on all of us. So then
Right.
we both take a bottle at the same time, and I could pump, and then even my older son could feed them, which was cute. Like he could hold their bottles for them. They had the little, like this little table for two feeding system that they would sit in. And they shared a room for sure. And they even, and like this is the first time ever that they've had separate rooms finally. And then they would usually be separated in their classes when they first started going to school. But this is the first time ever that they decided to both try being in the same class together. So I'm kind of like, let's just see how it goes, right? It's kind of
Yeah. Oh, that's so fun. I think twins, triplets, that kind of dynamic is so unique and not a lot of people get to experience it. And I probably won't because I know it's heavily a genetic component that helps you get there. And that's not something that we have. But I love to hear from moms that have been through that because it is such a different ball game than just having one.
exactly.
Like it just is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so talk a little bit about the app that you have that you kind of went off and did on your own that you're offering for people that are looking for classes specifically from you.
Well, thank you. So yes, because I had way long ago actually, which is really funny. My very first kind of claim to fame was the MTV yoga video. So I did a video for MTV in 2003, and then we did 3 more DVDs with them. So then I produced my own DVDs after that. And then I started working on the Home Shopping Network, and then I did a DVD with Bethenny Frankel. And like the DVDs were still kind of the thing, and then all of a sudden they started to go away and things became much more online, and that's when I was like, okay, let's figure something out in this landscape. And that's when I fell into the Peloton thing, which was awesome. I actually like reached out to them and said, is Peloton going to do yoga? And so then I was online with Peloton, but prior to that I had actually launched my own app. It was like 2010, and I did it with some partners and we did it together, and it was going okay, it was fine, but it never really took off. And then we let that go. And so now to have the opportunity to do it again after all the different things I've learned through all these different years, and to do it in a way that like now it's just my own, I'm not really partnering with anyone. So it's scary because it's more weight on my shoulders, but it's also more freedom and more creativity. And I want it to feel like a studio, like the next best thing that you can get from going to a studio, because I know that it's not going to replace that live feeling that you get when you're in studio with students, and especially as a yoga teacher when I can give hands-on adjustments and I can see people swarm. But there's going to be times when you're maybe at home and you can't get to studio, or you can't get to a class, or you can't get to the gym. I want it to be that place where people can then feel like they're at home and they can lift and they can do Pilates and they can flow with me in their own home when they're short on time. Or maybe that is the only place that they can actually get their classes from, or they just want to be home all the time, right? Maybe they are. And like, I've got some women later in life who they don't need that energy of going to a gym or being surrounded by people in class. But we do have Zoom classes through the app where I can see people still, which is really cool, because now I can actually correct form, get to know people, get the community to feel more together. I have on-demand classes, and then I have the live classes where it's just me leading, and then that class goes up on demand. And I also just really wanted to accommodate everyone who was like, oh my gosh, I love your style of yoga, but how do I get to keep taking class with you? So I wanted to make it a continuum where I can offer yoga classes all the time, and flows that I come up with, creativity sequences, also the Pilates that people have loved, come to love from Peloton and from the other stuff in the past, like MTV Pilates and things like that. Also, I just feel like now I can do it a lot quicker. So I'm not dealing with a huge production company. If someone comes up to me and says, oh my gosh, like someone today, I need a 20-minute standing yoga flow only because I can't bear weight on my wrists right now because she's having wrist issues. So I can turn around and film a 20-minute standing only yoga class, put it on the app, and it's ready for her. So I really love this, being able to like in real time get content up for people.
Well, that's so cool about the not being able to bear weight through the hands, because I had a patient, this is about a year ago at this point, but she was a yoga instructor who could not bear weight through her wrist. And so a lot of what we were doing was trying to work around that, keep her still practicing, but also getting her stronger.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually feel like wrist and hand things are super common if people are very into the yoga space. So that's a really cool thing that you're offering. I love that.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
so many flows we can do, and you can warm up your heart rate. Like Sun Salutations warms up your breath, your body, and gets you into the breath and builds that heat so that when you're in the rest of the postures. But you can do that even through like warrior flows or warrior sun cells, or, there's so many ways to do that without having to go through chaturanga, up dog, down dog. And again, you're right, because there is a lot of wrist issues, because I see, because of the lack of strength training,
There we go.
right?
Full circle.
Right? People are just kind of falling into their joints and that hypermobility, or they're not strong enough actually to be doing some of the postures, or as much as we repeat them. Sometimes we do a lot of chaturangas throughout a class. And if your form starts to suffer, then you're going to feel it in wrists or elbows or shoulders or what have you. So that's where this whole combination and that well-roundedness of doing it all, I think, is really important.
Oh, that was such a good way to close out that piece that we were talking about in the beginning. Absolutely. Cross training is the goal.
Yeah.
And you also are kind of big on the mindfulness. I don't know if I want to say like meditation.
Mm-hmm.
Is that also something that you offer in the app?
Yes, I have meditations as well. And I have a twice daily meditation practice. So I do 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes midday. And I love mantra meditation as well. So I've got a lot of different meditations with different mantras that people can use. I have some family stuff as well, because everyone liked the kids and family meditations that I had done at Peloton. So just getting younger kids to try and find that place inside them of peace and listen to their inner voice, and start at a younger age, because there's always that outside, pressure, and we always really, it's so hard not to have that extrinsic, again, that like looking at everything outwards, and instead finding what feeds you from the inside.
That's a really hard thing to do. I think that people are more widely accepting of meditation nowadays, or even just
Mm-hmm.
mindfulness, having a moment of silence throughout your day. But it's tough. Like, do you think that just like with anything else, with practice, it gets better? Because sometimes I think even when I practice, I still suck.
No, and that's the thing that I want people to start to change the way they view their meditation practice, as less of a good or bad, or, that one sucked or that one wasn't right, because not, it's all good. It's like brushing your teeth every day. Just showing up and doing it is actually going to have so much more effect than you realize. And you notice the days that you don't brush your teeth. Like, have you ever fallen asleep and woken up in the morning and you're like, oh my Lord, I fell asleep without brushing my teeth? That's how I start to feel with my meditation practice. It's like, oh man, I missed that meditation, and I need it so much, because it makes me feel so good, and there's no judgment. So I think what we really learn in meditation is that when those thoughts come, as opposed to judging them or clinging to them or following them, we return to our breath, or we return to a mantra, or whatever it is, so that in real life, the same thing can happen. So instead of like judging ourselves when we're doing something, or recreating the past and getting frustrated at ourselves, or jumping to the future, we can just be with this moment right here, and in a nonchalant way, and in a very compassionate way, so that we learn to observe and not judge. And so that's like your goal, if you're going to start meditating, or do it even like a couple minutes a day, to not put any judgment on yourself, to just be like, I'm just going to sit here for a couple minutes, whatever happens happens, doesn't matter. I know
Yeah.
it's hard to do, but that's where I think we start. And the more we do that, the less harsh we are on ourselves.
Yes, and I do think a cheat code that I read not too long ago, it's a classic book, The Power of Now by
Yes,
Eckhart Tolle. Great book. And he says, the moment that you realize you aren't present, you are. So that's a good way to kind of have a positive feedback loop. So if you are practicing meditation, or you're trying to be more mindful, and your mind trails off, as it always will, but then when you realize that it did, you're back to square one, and so you did a good job by recognizing it, and now we're present again. So I love that
exactly. I love
little
that.
mantra.
So the second you realize you're not present, you are.
You are.
Yeah,
Yeah, because you realize you're like, "Oh, wait, my mind went somewhere else," but I recognized it. It's the not recognizing that I think gets people.
exactly. And it's this whole concept of begin again, right? Your mind wandered off. Okay, begin again, right here, right now, in this moment. And you just
Yep.
keep doing that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's crucial to work on for everybody, but especially I think now as a new mom, because I am spending time with this baby, and I'm like, I think it's human nature for me to want to be like, okay, wait, but I got this business that I have to run, and I got to shoot this content, and I got to, and I'm like, wait, no, I can actually just be here right now. That's okay. I can accept that. It's fine. So yes, I love that you offer the practice with that. And switching gears a little bit, but I just want to know how life has been since you moved from New York City, because you were in New York City for 30 years.
30 years. I was in New York City and it was amazing. And I absolutely love New York. It has this energy and this culture and diversity. And, I was a theater major. And so for me, Broadway and theater and dance and music is just everything. But it's also a lot of, I would say, not stress, but like there's always this striving energy. I love it because everyone goes to New York, or people are in New York. A lot of times they're there to like really make something of themselves, or like strive to be, really good at their craft, and in all different walks of life or different fields, right? So I kind of wanted my boys not to feel that kind of pressure yet, because there's already enough pressure as is. And so if they ever choose to then move into the city and feel what I felt when I was in college and in my younger years, great. But I just wanted a kind of a little bit more breath, a little bit more space. There's also just this whole, like, it's very financially expensive to live in New York City itself. And so it's been nice. I think it's finally one of these, it's good for me as well, because I just am like, okay, I don't always have to go, 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 go. And there is that energy when you're in New York. So it's nice to just have a little bit more like fresh air.
What was New York like in the 90s, though? I'm so curious how it's changed over the past
Like,
30
gosh,
years.
New York in the 90s, so much fun. Like
I bet.
I was in the East Village. I was in Third Avenue North dorms. And then I moved in with my boyfriend at the time on the Lower East Side. We were on 10th between First and A. And I remember, though, they were like, don't go into Alphabet City. It's too dangerous. Now, like, Alphabet City is the place to be, and the Lower East Side is the place to be. But there was just this feeling of exploration and community, and all these yoga studios that started popping up that were, again, it was like so brand new. And there were like Joan Jett would be practicing yoga next to me, or like Willem Dafoe. And I was like, whoa, this is so cool. And I would usher at all the different little theaters off Broadway that I could go into and pass out playbills and see shows. Just the people that you could meet. And that's the coolest thing about New York, is you're just kind of always surrounded by different people and different walks of life. And you learn so much because of that. And the food, all these different kind of, the first time I had ever tried any sort of different food outside of what I had grown up with, so like even things like sushi that I had never eaten, and Middle Eastern food. I worked at a Middle Eastern restaurant for right out of college as well. And so I think there's so much to take in, and so much excitement in life. And the best thing too is I think we were really living, because there was no cell phones. And
I was just about to say that.
in bars, I mean, people were smoking, like everyone was smoking in bars and going to dance clubs, and like, because they hadn't even banned smoking yet. So it's just thinking back to like going to, like Webster Hall and dancing and people hanging out and having conversations. I miss
Yes.
that.
Yes. I feel like when I think of the 90s in New York City, which I was born in 96, so I definitely couldn't have witnessed it myself, but I just think it would be peak human time to be alive, because, yeah, no cell phones, or maybe a flip phone. I don't even think
Yeah,
those
I
were.
can't remember when I got mine. Yeah.
Yeah, and people are just there, present in the moment, like we were talking about before. And also, it's just like everything is up and coming. Nothing is crazy huge yet. There's still pieces in New York City that kind of are undiscovered or haven't developed yet, and I think it would have just been magical. But on the flip side, I also think being out west, being in Idaho, would also be amazing. So,
Oh, yeah, growing up in Idaho was incredible. Having the outdoors, having, skiing and cycling and hiking. And my dad was always taking us to all these cool different places, like Yellowstone National Park. And we'd always do camping trips and drive up into Canada. And so there's like this whole element of just having, I don't know, like this outdoor landscape that you could constantly call your playground and have so much fun, and so like little pressure of, not worrying about things. Like my mom would let me and my friends just go and do things in the park, and okay, we'll see you later, be home at whatever, like
right.
there's the one thing, in New York City, I've never felt ever afraid in New York City, ever. Like, interesting to me, like sometimes when people will be like, oh, New York City, isn't it so scary? Then I'm like, I've never once felt unsafe in New York City. But there is also that element of like, you do have to be a little bit more like on your toes and aware of where you're going and what you're doing.
True. Yes, I don't think I've ever felt in danger in New York City either. There's so many people. It's like there's so many eyewitnesses. What's going to happen, you know?
Yeah.
Everyone's there. So I get that. Just in closing, I was just kind of reflecting on your career arc from, you know, graduating NYU to everything that you have done up until this point. It's been quite the wild ride. I mean, I would say definitely a non-traditional career arc in the best way because you're a full-on entrepreneur at this point. If you could go back to your NYU student self and give yourself any advice or any wise words, what would you tell yourself?
I would tell myself to stay open and stay curious because I think that's been the thing that's really helped me along my career path is that I've always been just excited to learn and to keep growing and to, I think even just moving to New York City and just being like, okay, I'm open to this. I'm open to experience what comes my way. And then being curious about learning is always so important because I feel like we never get to this place where we know it all or we have it all or our method is the way or this is the thing. I'm like, I'm still constantly learning from everyone I talk to, from you, from other people that are, people are coming up with new things, I'm sure, that have not been around when I was learning about the body and movement and kinesiology and all these things. So I just feel like as we continue to stay open and curious, then our world will continue to expand.
Yes. Growing up, my dad used to say, the older I get, the less I know.
Very true. That's
Yeah.
exactly how I feel.
Yeah. Yep. Well, I appreciate you so much for coming on. I think everybody's going to love to have heard from you.
Oh, thank
Where can people find more about you? And I will link things in the show notes too.
Okay, so KristinMcGee.com is my website, Kristin with an I at the end. And on the website, you can get the 7-day free trial. And then my Instagram is Kristin McGee. My TikTok is Kristin_McGee. And I have some books. I have the chair yoga book I wrote years ago. I have a somatic exercises for dummies book. And I have another book that's just coming out, the Treat Yourself Philosophy. And I have retreats. So if anyone ever wants to come and join me at any of the retreats coming up, I would love that. I mentioned one in Blackberry Farm in Tennessee next May, and also Canyon Ranch in November in Arizona and in Lenox.
Wow. Okay. Maybe I'll find myself at one of those retreats. That would be fun.
Love that. That'd be so amazing.
Well, thank you again. And I guess until next time.
Thank you so much, Ronnie. We'll talk soon.
Time for a quick little ad break so I can talk about my one and only most favorite application when it comes to business, the Jane app. Jane is a clinical management software, and I like to call it a one-stop shop for everything you need to get your clinic started. And this doesn't just apply to physical therapists. Anybody that is in the patient care realm can use the Jane app and transform their business with it, just like I did. I use Jane on a daily, maybe I would even say hourly basis, from scheduling my patients, processing payments, running reports, reaching out to patients, sending automated text reminders and email reminders about appointments, taking virtual rehab coaching and mentoring calls through the Jane app, and honestly, so much more. Jane is there for you. They do everything with you, and it feels like I have a coworker with me when I'm using Jane every day. Lucky for you listeners, I now can give you a 2-month grace period with my code RonniePT2MO. That's all caps, RONIPT, number 2, capital M, capital O. Look for the link in the show notes to learn more about Jane, and be sure to use that code to get your 2 free months with Jane.